Because the key issue here is it's for, like I said, the people because of the issues that affect us. These are concerns that we need to be dealing with. In terms of the pro-melanin 2000, the so-called formulas that are out there that could possibly enhance our functioning, well, we need to be doing that, studying that, rather than having white people studying it and doing it. But the issue is, with all those scientific terms that I have in there, well, I made no apologies in the beginning in terms of subjecting people to it, because we need to know it. We need to understand some of those technical terms, because those terms do start to give you an understanding of it. So it's almost like I want it to be for the people, but the nature of the debate and the technical issues may not be absorbed by many. So I think that hopefully it's going to be on both ends. Yeah. And the reason why, again, I focused on the title, The Science of Melanin, is kind of focus on those issues, not be lightweight on it. That's why we're being labeled as pseudoscientists. See, you're not even empirically doing anything. You're not even addressing it in a scientific manner. So I didn't want to be caught like that. So I still had to come out with that strong scientific terminology. So hopefully it'll be for both ends, the academician plus the non-academician. The middle chapters in there are basically heavily scientifically oriented in terms of dealing with the ear system, dealing with the eye system, dealing with the nervous system. I mean, there'll be some terms that some people just will not make the investment into finding out what they really mean in terms of dealing with the locus ceruleus or the inner ear, dealing with the semicircular canals. Well, that may not be too much going on there, but the beginning chapters dealing with the issues that we were just talking about, Carol Barnes, Dr. Welsing, most people have some understanding of that. So some of the scientists don't know anything about that. So on the back end, when we start dealing with the material-spiritual connection, I was going to say that for a whole other document and then kind of focus on the pineal gland. But I decided to put it all into one. That's why I'm saying hopefully it'll be something for everybody in there.
Well, I do. I guess to clarify what I asked earlier, in this statement right here, you said on a cellular level, melanin is a chemical secreted by specialized cells called melanocytes. And I guess when I read that, I don't know whether I'm supposed to take that from just all, it does that for all people, or is it differentiated with race? And that's where I find myself asking the question, is this just for blacks, or is it for blacks and whites? You know, like, is the melanin in the brain the same for, I mean, but in Carol Barnes' book called Jazzy Melanin, you know, he talked about a couple different types of melanin
And they exist.
and different in whites and blacks, and I look for that differentiation in your book, and I really see it.
Okay, well, in the introduction, which is kind of long, most people haven't got past the introduction. You know, I keep asking about it, and they're still reading that part. Well, I kind of emphasize things within there. And the whole issue about melanocytes, which are cells to produce the melanin, white people have melanocytes. They just don't have a lot of melanin to make them black. And why can we say that? Because they can go out there and tan. It's something.
They usually manifest themselves as liver spots.
All right. But just the fact that they can either have that or just tan states that there's melanin there. So there's cells that can produce it, but they just don't have the high capacity in terms of producing a lot of melanin to make them dark. And even the people who don't have any melanocytes, they're basically lost with no melanin, are basically albinos. And as Dr. Welsing speaks of white people as being as albinos. But there are different forms of albinos coming from different forms of this enzyme called tyrosinase, or the so-called precursor molecule to make the melanin, tyrosine. You know, so we start to get in more derivations there. And the breakdown that Carol Barnes has is correct in terms of the pheomelanin, the eumelanin. People have red freckles, you know, basically white people have the red-colored, you know, hair or the freckles. That's pheomelanin. But then you have the darker skinned people, which makes up eumelanin. So certainly you start to get the distinctions. That's why then you can get into the trap by saying melanin makes you do that. What form of melanin, you know what I mean? Or is there many forms that causes different functions? I think if we just focus on the scientific principles behind how it actually works, we start to understand a little bit better. So that's why chapter 3 probably the most important, to at least understand how it's working in different parts of the body. Question?
What exactly is melanin? Totally.
Chemical.
Is it would you classify it as, is it made up of amino acids, or what exactly?
That's the thing about it. It's like a biopolymer. And in
Plastic, you're telling me?
the way Carol Barnes has investigated, he has a diagram of it, I think where he took from somewhere else, where it has most of the neurotransmitters in there, most of the so-called precursor molecules of those neurotransmitters in there. It's like a large molecule that has everything. That's why when they first started, when Europeans first started investigating this, they thought it was a waste product. It was just the end product of all those so-called neurotransmitters or catecholamines being created. It just deposited and it doesn't do anything. That's what the original idea was, because why it had all those substances in there. That's why it's such a powerful substance in terms of, again, its connection with many things. And the whole thing about the drug stuff, that's why, again, the drug addiction and people are making the connection between, again, the highly melanated you are and the more stuff you may be to drugs, certain types of drugs, because, again, it's an attracting substance.
No, what I was going to say, you were mentioning about that they thought it was a byproduct or a waste product, being, say, dead, of no use. You can also trace that back to the Greek language, because the word Negro comes from necro, and necro means dead. So we got to understand what they are doing is calling and utilizing, say, definitions, and if not definitions, metaphors that they've created out of some misconceptions and calling it science. As Bobby Wright said, draw a gun on you, tell you if you don't believe it, I'm going to kill you.
Well, it'd be nice if we go ahead and say it. Call it something else besides the melanin, you know what I mean? To give it a more descriptive name for something that it could actually be, doing. So.
No, but not that the melanin is a bad name for it, but you was talking about a waste product, and they thought it was a waste product. And I'm just looking at how the language plays into that.
My next question is a continuation of the first question. If melanin has all of these things, and if it's a polymer, and my understanding of a polymer is many different things, like you just said, wouldn't that give it some properties that would definitely, and I think you did mention this in the book, it will have certain properties that will make you, I don't know any other way to put it but superior, in certain aspects, in your ability. Thank you very much. It is an enhancement. It is an enhancing chemical. So seeing as how it is an enhancing, or from the way I'm looking at, and I've read Barnes, and I've read Richard King, and I've read Francis Welsing, and I've read some of your book, and I've not finished it yet. And I'm, it's moved up a notch on the list now. But I'm understanding that being as it is an enhancer, that would lend some legitimacy to the things that King and Welsing and all these people are talking.
And I don't doubt their understanding or their legitimacy in explanation. It's the way that it's being interpreted by the people and the way the documents are presented. That's what I'm criticizing. Not every single lecture that's been out there, but the key to kind of focus on your thing about the advantages. What are they doing with drills in terms of the ends of the drill bits that go down to the ground? Right, it's what? To absorb the heat so they don't crack. The stealth bomber, is it white, blue, green? It's black. Okay, so in terms of the properties that are now into the physical world, in terms of the way it's been now taken out of the laboratory to be utilized, certainly we can see there, therefore you can make the easy extrapolation to the body, well, it's doing the same thing here. So I understand that, and I'm trying to present it that way, but I would stay away from the word superior. Now, why would I also do that? Because my understanding of, again, when you start talking about origins, when you start talking about white people or Europeans, you ask them where they came from, they won't know, okay? Some of them may say that, but they really don't know. When you start talking about the change of, again, African people into Europeans, being stuck up in that cold place because of maybe some cataclysmic event, causing them to be stuck there for many years, there's a whole group of fossils called Grimaldi man that have rickets.
Called what?
Grimaldi, Grimaldi man. We have Australopithecine, we have Homo erectus. So all those types of fossil names. Well, Grimaldi was the fossil that was found there in Europe. It had rickets. What is rickets? A bone deformity, okay? Coming from, why is it being deformed though? Where does vitamin D come from? Sun. Okay. So these people who were dark couldn't survive. So that's why, again, I focus on, well, certainly depending upon the environment you're in, it may be an advantage. Certain environments, it may be a disadvantage. And people were dying. So they had to mutate or change over the years, and that changing caused them to survive much better.
Well, I was just going to comment on Grimaldi, man, as per Sheikh Anta Diop, and his reference to the fact that it was not until they had discovered, and this is what really gets me, because he says, if I'm not mistaken, until they discovered fish, or how to fish, and began to eat fish, did the rickets, that's when the rickets disappeared, because fish was a source of vitamin D. Then I think back to things that I've read about how the ancient Egyptians, when they would run across a red-headed human being, automatically assume that, or say that he was a child of Set and therefore evil, and would kill them immediately. And then I think about how Francis Cress Welsing and all these other people talk about how these albino children were ostracized, and mothers love children no matter what they are or who they look like, and perhaps they would push them away but yet continue to feed them until they got larger, and then explain to them, you got to get out of here, because if you don't, you're not going to live. They're going to kill you. When they lay eyes on you, you're dead. So they perhaps migrated northward, and this is all theory, of course. They migrated northward until the glacial ages started, and perhaps that's why we see so many dead in the Grimaldi region of northern Italy or southern France. And that thing, you know, happens, but still they were, I don't think, from the way I understand it, I don't think they were highly melanated in the first place.
All right, well, let me try to address that from two angles. One from in that region, one from the actual migration coming on up, dealing with Dr. Welsing's issue of she takes credit for being the world's first abusive parent, you know what I mean, in terms of kicking them out of Africa, okay, and across the hot burning sands. When you're in Europe, there isn't really a lot of waterways, you know, in terms of the fish to be actually the so-called regenerative property to receive now vitamin D since the sun wasn't shining. I wouldn't look at it there. The true evidence there was the Eskimos, who have a large body of water and who are also living in a dark environment. So within the Eskimos, I think that you can clearly see the effects of the vitamin D. I wouldn't necessarily focus that on Grimaldi, man, because of the region that they're in, saying that it's now the source of vitamin D from the fish. And there's a whole lot of science, too, behind that because of our parents giving us cod liver oil when we were young, not knowing why. They knew something was going on, and now we can understand the source of vitamin D.
You made a point now, you just made a point that that makes me go back to the environment theory. And they say that the reason why people are like they are is because they were, you know, in that cold place and they had to survive. You know, Eskimos, I know Eskimos personally. That's some of the most peaceful people I have ever met in my life.
Okay.
They are some of the sweetest people. They will give you their last. I spent about 6 months up in Alaska when I was in the military. And those people would literally give you their women.
And I wouldn't consider them European either, you know what I mean?
No, they're not. But, you know, they are up there.
Right.
And that's, you know, in worse, you know, shorter growing seasons and shorter daylight. You know, they got 6 months a day and 6 months a night, you know, and the day that they do have, you can't really, you know, they do have a little. So then that goes back to say that they were perhaps definitely, what do they call them?
They were definitely not
They are not. Well, we realize that they are not.
There was a land bridge for everybody going back and forth.
I understand that, but I'm just saying that theory, then that kind of blows that theory out of the water, talking about it's their environment that made them evil. I think it was something, it could have possibly been the lack of melanin, you know, because these people have melanin and they're peaceful and they're in that environment, but these Europeans, they will kill you just because you don't look like them, you know, and they were in a similar environment. without the water, of course, and we know water is the life giver. Beyond, above and beyond all things, one must have water.
I just would find, I wouldn't down the statement, but I would have a hard time finding the evidence to state that that was the case, that it's because of the so-called chemical that really caused them to act like that, and now that has been in their genes for so many years. Could be, but may not be. So I won't emphasize that as a point of conjecture. The thing about, though, Africa, in terms of leaving Africa and now going to Europe, it's kind of hard to believe that a few people who were looked at as the so-called albinos or whatever would then accumulate to make the amount of people that we see today as Europeans. It doesn't really correlate. So I wouldn't look at it as the few people that have been kicked out of their families and now, as they got older, they now got together and then made Europeans. I don't think that is, the numbers don't fit. And the whole issue about us and albinos, we got albinos in our families today. We got albinos in Africa. We
don't ostracize them today as the record states that they were ostracized in ancient times.
So ancient times, there is actually evidence that states that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That they were like banned?
Yeah, that they wrote down. That's written.
Yeah.
Yes, they were called the children of Set. Set was associated with the Red Desert.
Matter of fact, Job talks about that in his book.
Well, if that's the case, then certainly there could be some credence to that. You know, I don't have any evidence. I haven't read the documentation to state, therefore I'm not going to present that. But if it's there and I can read it, then I'll certainly know. Okay. And the other thing is, they say Bobby Hemmett was talking about on the temples. There's something about Tamahu people, and it's even written in the book African Presidents in Early Europe by Ivan Van Sertima, Journal of African Civilization. In there's an article about Tamahu means creative people. So this could have been way back then where, now giving some, because the argument that I get in class is I present some of this information and students want to go ahead and bring in Yakub, you know what I mean? It's like, I can't deny it, but also don't have any proof to stand on it. I would only focus on those things that I can now see with some evidence. And that's why I say I would personally focus on the Grimaldi issue. But I'm not going to down somebody who's going to talk about the Yakub. And the bottom line is they don't know where they came from. Therefore, there could be a whole lot of issues that, people could be throwing darts at. And I want to, should I? Stay out of that argument. You know what I mean? But the issues are on the table, and as more research comes up, as more people document things, hey, maybe we'll know. And also the thing is, well, we don't care. What are you going to do now that they're here? You know what I mean? So it wouldn't even be much of a issue to kind of focus on to find out where they did come from. But the fact that now they are here, and we as a people ain't really organized to deal with the situation that's going on, that's where the concern needs to be. So I just, again, would have a hard time focusing just the one chemical thing, or the lack of melanin issue.
Would you be more comfortable, not to say, but if people were to qualify the statement about the superiority of highly melanated people, would you be more comfortable with that, such as, we know that highly melanated people can tolerate UV rays a lot better. They, have a keener sense of hearing. So if they sort of qualify that as opposed to just saying, highly melanated people are just superior overall, would you be more comfortable with that, or is it just?
I don't know. Let's take this argument to the thing about intelligence. Europeans want to say that Europeans are more intelligent, more superior intelligent.
But based on standardized tests.
Yes.
It's shown by studies that the motor skills of children, African American and African children are far superior to European children. So they get into.
Yeah. I don't know. The word superior and inferior, I don't know if they do justice to the issues that need to be debated in society.
Even if they qualify, we could say, okay, as far as UV rays, highly melanated people, are, maybe you want to use a different word, but if you talk about superiority and inferiority, we hear music differently. We see color differently. Those things are documented. So why not just say it? When you add it all up, there's a whole lot of things that we
Because you don't want to be a reverse racist or anti-Semitic, and all these other things, these adjectives that they've created.
Because even looking at that, if you have a certain type of sunglasses, they may absorb some certain type of UV waves or whatever. Well, you wouldn't say a superior type of glasses. You just say they're a better type of glasses, or they function better in this.
I think it's just semantics. I mean, you know, I mean, they are superior because if you're looking for the best, you're gonna go for the.
Spit it out, spit it out.
You can turn off the tape and just say,
We'll keep it amongst us. We won't tell nobody you said it.
With the people in the community, in the black community, there are people in the black community that have a problem with saying that, with anyone saying that this is superior to that, and they do look on. Unfortunately, it is because of the miseducation and brainwashing. But there are people who need this information in this format so that they will not, you know, take it and look at it as another one of those black things like they were removed from the black thing, you know. So it's all good.
Question back.
I say a lot of the issues that we're bringing up about this now, it's basically a cultural thing. You know, plain and simple. I mean, you take the African culture and put it with European culture, they just don't mix. We had a culture, we can trace our culture. They really can't trace their culture. They didn't have a culture, more or less. So they have a situation where we, you know, have stereotypes, perpetuated lies told about us. So now all of a sudden the truth's coming on because everything's gonna come out eventually. But now they have to keep their dominance over the situation. I mean, they got the History Channel, they got all this stuff, you know, plugged in and trying to keep people locked in. Well, this is really what happened. This is the truth. When in fact we know it isn't. So right now it's a situation. I understand where everybody's coming from about, you know, not saying superior, you know, not saying certain things, and you know, having a situation where you got basically a war because you got other people who on the outside don't know nothing about it. Hear a little bit of something, and the brothers get crazy, go grab guns, do whatever. But you got a situation now. It really is. And these people, they armed to the teeth. They're ready for it because this is what they fear. They fear us anyway. But you have a situation now where we have this information. All we need to do is just keep it within ourselves. That's what we have to do in our community, and just pass it along. I understand what you're talking about, again, but a lot of stuff is just cultural.
Yeah.
We have a culture and they don't. That's why when we do certain things, if we lose our job, no pressure. We go find another job, we'll survive. These guys in Wall Street lose a job, they go jump out a window, it's the end of the world for them. I mean, that's it. We can survive. And they have not been taught how to survive, plain and simple.
Yeah. Well, as you see, you brought in the cultural component. We've already spoke about a social component. Therefore, this ain't just a biopsychological approach to analyzing something in our community. But we have to hit it from all angles. And due to the level of complexity that is going on in terms of our problems in the community, I think that there's no one way that we can deal with it. Certainly the cultural issues are real. I got a phone call from community service. They asked if 6 students could sit in my class. I said, sure. Assume they were high school students. Called back. I said, where are they from? I said, Providence. Okay. Called back. I said, they white or black? I said, white students. All right. So I was at the point of talking about revolution in my class, in terms of, again, what's going on with Africa, in terms of the colonization and what we see today, in terms of the Mobutus that are still in existence. So they came in class, and I was concerned because they don't need to hear some more information. They don't need to know what's going on in certain issues. And it's also the same thing with this. But the point is, how else are we going to get it to the people? However, in certain points of dialogue, I think there are things we talk about and certain things that we will not be expressing because they don't need to know where we're coming from. But I think that as a people, we're not really at a level of sophistication. They got super highway stuff going on in terms of internet. We still on the exit ramp. So we ain't even ready in terms of dealing with the level of communication. Somebody told me there's a book review on this on internet. I don't know anything about that, but the point is, white folks are on top of things. The whole thing you said about staying ahead, oh, certainly. The whole thing about what movie, Stargate. They're going to stay 5 steps ahead of you when they know that you're getting on to something and distract you. You're off on something else.
You see, that's the nature of controlling your own institutions.
Yeah.
See, they ensure by controlling our institutions that we stay at that level until we break that mold and totally cut them loose.
So the whole thing about these white students, I wasn't white students, it was 4 white students and 2 white professors. And at the end of the class, the white professor ended up saying something about, yeah, well, Dr. Moore was correct about saying this, and the students like, yeah, now the white man validated, so it's okay, right?